Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the first session of Transform the Changing Consumer, and welcome. My name is Dr. Pierangelo Rosati. I'm assistant professor in business analytics here at DCU Business School. And I will be the MC for today's session with Luke Reaper and Paul Loughrey. As you may know, the Transform series is a new free online seminar series that explores the growing impact of digital transformation on business and society. We'll be covering a total of 6 different themes, ranging from the future of work to smart cities and communities to circular economy and so on. Today, we'll be looking at, this is the 4th event of the series, and we'll be looking at how different digital technologies are changing consumers' experience and expectations. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by Luke Reaper, Managing Director of Behaviour and Attitudes, and Paul Loughrey, Head of Audience Insight at RTE. Welcome both. Thanks for taking the time to joining us today.
Very welcome.
So Luke and Paul will be telling us a bit more about their work and how it's changing consumer experience and expectations. So for the audience, feel free to send questions through the Q&A features that you see at the bottom of the screen throughout the talk, and we'll try to address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Please note that the chat function is disabled, so you can only use the Q&A function. So with no further delay, I'll hand you over to Paul and Luke. Over to you, and I'll be in the background in case if there is anything that you need help with.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Pierangelo. We're delighted to be presenting here today. So we're going to do a double header. It will be myself first off, kicking off, talking a little bit about the mood of the nation before I hand over to Paul from RTE, who will take us through some of the media side, and then I'll come back in and sum up at the end of that. So so in terms of the consumer confidence and in terms of how they're changing at the moment, I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides. Let me just get the sharing function working. Molly, you might give me control if that's possible.
Paul, you have control. If you just click the screen first, you should be able to control it.
Will you control it, or am I?
I think you need to give me control there, Paul.
Oh, I did that, sorry.
Apologies, it was Paul that had control. Now it's Luke. Sorry.
Okay, great, no problem at all. The joys of home working, as they say. So I'm going to take you through a couple of data sets which are sources for, I suppose, the insights and around consumers at the moment. One is, I suppose, the TAM Ireland B&A tracker, which we've been conducting over a number of different waves throughout this pandemic. The RTE COVID tracker, which we got straight into in terms of in April and May of last year, and then the more recent RTE Mood of the Nation, which we conducted face-to-face in September. And these are all quota-controlled samples, very representative, and give us great insight into the Irish consumer and what's going on out there. And we can draw together other more recent work that we're actually doing at the moment as well. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the mood of the nation, a couple of key themes emerging. One is, I suppose, just in terms of economic and the economic aspect. Most consumers at the moment are secure, at least for now, in terms of their jobs and so forth and that. But I suppose one of the critical things is that a lot of supports are in place, and there is a fear over the next 12 months for, I suppose, jobs and the economy and that. And I suppose that's leading to a very frugal mindset out there at the moment. And people are watching, I suppose, what they're spending and indeed where things are going into the future on that. The other interesting theme which is emerging is, not surprisingly, mental health. And we'll see where that ranks, I suppose, in relation to the economy and other issues in a second, and some other charts and that. But it very much is a burning issue out there for a large cohort of society. We're also seeing is a tech revolution for some, so not for everybody. I know we're all on video conferencing here today. There's a lot of home working happening, but not everybody can work from home, and we have to remember that. So, but I suppose people are more reliant on tech, more reliant on broadband, more reliant on obviously working from home. And indeed, what's interesting as well is that broadband's now becoming more important than actually roads. So it shows us where I suppose people's views are at the moment. And also, there's also a fear, obviously, of COVID still. It still very much exists. We can see, obviously, in the latest lockdown, that's certainly still emerging with people staying at home more. But I suppose there is still some concern about the vaccine. And I suppose most recent results there, there was a study out today that was interviewed that said about 3 and 4 are open to. So there's still some people sitting on the fence of that, not as much as other nations and that, but it is something to be mindful of, and that the government is obviously monitoring that. And very much, COVID has been a catalyst for change in terms of the quality of our lives, and that we've almost 3 in 5 people wanting some desire for change as a result of this. It's very much a wake-up call in terms of how hectic our lives are, our personal collections, who we've lost touch with. We have a healthier focus out there in terms of exercise, mental health, etc. And also as well, a little bit more appreciation or a need of the life-work balance, and also as well in terms of how working from home, an appreciation of that, and also the challenges that might bring, and how do we actually do that. Benefits might be less commuting. The downside is, how do you do that in terms of different accommodation sizes and so forth and that. And I suppose there's obviously implications of where we live in the future. Is that, do we always need to be living in urban centres? And I suppose there's notable differences by age and socioeconomic status. And the 25 to 34 age group is a standout group in terms of those being impacted by this pandemic very much. When we asked people, I suppose, to rate, the challenges facing Ireland at that versus the challenges for you personally, what is interesting is, look, it's not surprising that obviously COVID is right up there, and health service and hospitals. But it's interesting that the economy, which traditionally in these type of questions comes up very high, is in 3rd place, and mental health is now in 4th in terms of issues facing Ireland. And if you look at issues facing you personally, mental health and the economy are neck and neck. We have never, ever seen that in the history of our polling in terms of issues facing country and indeed personally for people in that. So very much is a step change in terms of people's outlook and that. So it's that tension, as we're seeing in terms of the government and how they're trying to navigate through this this pandemic, this tension between the economy, people's livelihoods, businesses, etc., and indeed in terms of mental health of individuals in terms of staying the course in that. In terms of expectations, in terms of salaries and wages and that into the future, into 2021, I suppose one of the key things is that about 3 in 10 expect their salaries to be cut, and this rises out by actually 4 in 10 about Dublin people in that. In terms of so far in COVID, it has impacted more blue collar, much more so in terms of those losing their jobs, and indeed under 35 as well, more so in that. And again, you think about those type of sectors that those cohorts would work in, and that it is not surprising that you can see that they would be impacted on that. And a more frugal consumer has arrived, and we saw this in the last recession. When things get tough and that people are just more careful in terms of what they spend. They're still focused on making money and earning a good living, but also they're regularly saving and they're conscious about savings and that. And that if there is a silver lining, any silver lining to this is that there is a huge amount of savings being stored up at the moment in that. And people are interested in terms of how and what sectors that might be released into and at what stage in that. And it's likely to be, we'd like to have this sort of mindset for the foreseeable future, certainly into a large part of this year at least in that, And this is most keenly felt amongst 25 to 49s and indeed ABC1s of that area. And I suppose COVID, look, it's not surprising, has negatively impacted on some of our behaviours, certainly in terms of mental health. 42% of us agreed it's affected our mental health. Children's mental health, as you can see, has been severely impacted on that. Increase in terms of drug taking, especially amongst Dubliners, and people coping in other ways, alcohol consumption, but also leading to a bit more strife at home and so forth. And 25 to 34s and Dubliners are key pressure points in terms of these behaviours and coping mechanisms and that. There's a vaccine paradox, as we know. People are concerned, good proportion of people are concerned still, and the most recent figures would echo this, about COVID-19. And the likelihood of taking a vaccine, it goes through, I suppose, ebbs and flows, but has, I suppose, since we did this poll where we had a third not likely to take the vaccine, that has decreased now to about 1 in 5 at this particular stage, or 1 in 4, 1 in 5 at this particular stage. So those likely to take the vaccine has actually increased, and that is something that obviously everyone's monitoring, and that to ensure that the level of don't knows, or those sitting on the fence, which I think probably is about 1 in 5 at the moment, would be convinced to actually take it, and that, and we get critical mass in that, and that's very important as we move forward. It's a tech revolution, as I mentioned, but not for everybody. And I suppose it's important with any study to understand, I suppose, the population and the dynamics as much as anything else. So we have about 1 in 5 of the population working from home. So not everybody works from home. We have a similar proportion that are working and cannot do their job from home. Now this was from September, in terms of that. But in terms of other research that we've done in the past as well, there's always this perception that, oh yeah, everyone can just move from office and move to home and do their work online. That's not the case by any stretch of the imagination, So physical trades, labor, shops, retail, hospitality, they cannot work from home to a large extent outside of obviously takeaways and so forth and that. So we have to understand that it's not as simple as just saying, yes, let's all just work from home, and that it's to what extent people can or can't do, which we need to consider in that as certainly as we move forward. And remember the bias in terms of home working. It is more middle class people, and it is much more likely to be Dublin people that can work from home as well in that. The other aspect is, what are we likely to do within the next 6 months in that? And we've been tracking this across 2020, and we'll be tracking it again in terms of this year as well. So we ask about a number of things: when, if all, do you expect to basically partake in these in each of the following and that. And what we see, I suppose, is that the planned purchasing of various things such as eating out, home furnishings, indeed home improvements, and so forth, that we're likely to continue over the pandemic, and indeed another more recent research we've done, they are likely to continue into the next few months as well. So people have plans, let's just say. There's a pent-up demand there, certainly, and that. And we'll come on to the importance of home a little bit later in terms of summer, but home has become much more important to people, and the spend levels in terms of making that a better place is likely to continue into the future on that. The other aspect which we see as well is to what extent have people been partaking in these sort of activities. So what we see is that more people, certainly 50% of the population now, are reporting purchasing more products and services online. And also as well, just over a third as well are purchasing more from smaller local shops and suppliers as well as and that, yeah. So that's kind of very interesting as well, that both can coexist, and that the local, Irish brands also being a good proportion also purchasing those. So that it doesn't have to be one or the other, that both can coexist, So the digital world and indeed the physical world and indeed the local versus global can coexist in that. And very much reminds me of the almost Buy Irish, Guaranteed Irish, going back a number of years ago, as starting coming to the fore, this local and buying local and supporting local businesses and that. Just a little bit in terms of media usage and sources of information. So sources used to get news and information during the COVID crisis. What do we see? I suppose just before Paul comes in, TV doing extremely well, and you see it in terms of any usage to get information. 3/4 of the population, half the population is the main source they use, and that. So, and as the crisis progressed, we see more and more people turning to TV and as by far the single most important source of news and information. And that, in reality, people use multiple channels and that. But we can see in terms of the sources used, and indeed that leads into trust and so forth, which we will see in a second. That then it's sort of into websites, radio, press, and then in terms of social media, there propping up the bottom. And what's the trusted source for information out there? TV wins across all age groups. And that. Yes, it spikes up in terms of 50 pluses and that. But if we look at, say, online, 18% of under 25s which have that as the most trusted source. Yeah. So just ahead of news sites, with TV 3/4 of those younger individuals feeling that TV is the most trusted site overall. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, and he will take you through some more media aspects.
Thanks, Luke. I'll just go back a slide there. Thanks for that. So we work quite closely with Luke and Behaviour and Attitudes. We've done quite a lot of work last year along the lines, specifically what Luke just talked about, change. We can see from our own numbers what people are doing or how they're interacting with RTE. And as a member of the TAM board, we were keen also to see the impact on content, so we can inform the industry, so we can make relevant content, and also for advertisers and advertising agencies to determine the mood of the nation. Some of you may have seen the Next Normal program, which was broadcast on the 1st of October. We did a massive piece of research with Luke and his company and to understand that Next Normal. And I think he's highlighted some of those just now in terms of that change, and will that change be around for a long time? I think that's the big question that we need to answer. So changes, what's the impact of the pandemic on people's values, needs, moods, and behaviours, to see if they have shifted? And no doubt they have. But as I said, the big question really is that here for the long term? And my own view is technology really has advanced the whole at a greater rate because of pandemic. In terms of my world and TV, part of the area that I would look at over the last 10 years, the level of TV penetration, so the number of people who have a TV in a household has remained fairly consistent, but people are able to consume on many other devices as well. It's like back in my day when I was young, you didn't want to watch TV with your parents. It wasn't cool. But what was cool is you'd go up to your bedroom and make a mixtape off FM radio and share it with your friends. Whereas nowadays people can go up, watch video, they can chat directly to friends, they can do a lot more. But in terms of actual TV in the house, that has remained fairly consistent. Levels of TV viewing have dropped slightly, but they're still quite significant. So the average person in a day watches 2 hours, 40 minutes every day of TV. And we also know from their own figures that they consume on players, on phones, on computers, on desktops. These numbers are based mainly just on the TV. TAM Ireland's aspirations are to be able to measure everything, and so we'll be able to determine the levels of viewing across all devices within the household. But the big significant thing that happened last year is how people consumed, and this is almost like a map of events from last year. So blue line is 2019, which would be a typical year, an average year. So people tend to watch a lot more TV, Jan, Feb, and then starts to decline heading into the brighter months, and it grows again back going into September, October, November. Last year, we should have seen spikes in the summertime, June, July, with the Olympics and the Euros, but because there was no Euros, then those numbers continued to decline. But you can see straight away the levels of viewing just grew massively. They were growing anyway because of the election in February in red, and then again to March, it was massive. There's a huge appetite for news, and I'll show you some of the examples of that later. And then as we thought we were coming out of it, the levels of interest in news started dropping off into the summer. fact that it carried on so much. We had no sport, we had no GAA, which all didn't kick in till later in the year. Levels of viewing didn't grow to the levels that we expected, and then we went into another lockdown pre-Christmas, and we're seeing similar levels now in Jan-Feb of people consuming media for news and trying to understand what's going on, and also just to forget what's going on as well. On a typical day, this would be the shape of a day for TV. So less TV viewing in the morning on the left-hand side, and then it gets to a peak around 9 o'clock of about 1.2 million people viewing in a day. And what you're seeing there is from the blue to the red is the change in the year and year. And in our world, this is quite significant. We base these numbers on a panel of over 2,000 people, and people's viewing habits tend not to change too much. Questions we're asking ourselves now is, so for example, you'll see in around 6 o'clock there in the evening, is that because people are not commuting, so they're able to consume TV earlier? Is it because they want to be informed about what's going on in the COVID world or in news in general? And similar at 9 o'clock. And news really brings everybody into view, and people are consistent between 6 and 9. Then after that, yeah, it's people heading off to bed, and the levels of viewing drop again. But within RT, specifically RT1, our viewing levels just went through the roof. So again, the red at 1 o'clock is the 1 o'clock news. Again, we're more people at home, we're more people able to consume TV at that time than before, because of lack of going to work for those who didn't need to go to work or weren't able to go to work. And then similar around 6 o'clock as well. But what's also interesting here, you can see the red going slightly behind last year. Big change for us was not being able to make content. So things like Fair City, we had to stand down because of social distancing and you know, people not wanting to spread the COVID. So we had to drop those series. TV viewing levels went down, and even when we were able to start bringing them back again, there was a 6-week lag. It takes about 6 weeks to make episodes before they go on air, and you're on a continuous 6-week lag on that. And even at this period, we're not at full capacity. Similar for Coronation Street in the UK and all those, they all had to stand down the big soaps. So levels of viewing went down slightly there, increased again for 9 o'clock news, and they were able to be maintained in terms of the overall growth post 9 o'clock. Similar for radio, so this more about the story here in terms of any radio. We saw a shift before COVID, after COVID, and in COVID as well, where people consuming more radio. But what we did notice as well within this on the left-hand side in blue is really people decided to lie on a bit longer, so they were listening to less radio earlier in the morning, again because of that lack of commuting. There was an impact on actual listenership at that time. Everything else during the day increased. The one thing I would say about this, so radio is measured through face-to-face interviewing, through the Joint National Listenership, ANLR, and that had to be stood down during the year because interviewers simply couldn't interview. But we know that that within JNLR it measures overall numbers, so it measures streaming as well. Our own streaming figures went through the roof at this time. So the fact that people were at home, they may have been at work in front of their desk in their bedroom, but also perhaps listening to radio through either their phones or their laptops when they're not necessarily able to do that in work. And still a similar picture here, you can see more pronounced there for the first thing in the morning. Less people listening had an impact on our morning Ireland listenership. But it came back a little later. People decided to get up. We're assuming that's where we go to people like Luke and ask them, is that fact? Can we find that out? And trying to understand if people are staying longer in bed, etc. So back to TV. So we know that the people have come into 6-1 in massive numbers on TV, and we saw about over 40% growth, and that was sustained throughout the night on a TV. right up to 9 o'clock, where the numbers came back again. And that would have an impact on people throughout the night. So people, there are creatures of habit in terms of consumption of TV. We also know that there's huge consumption of Netflix, huge consumption of other areas like Disney Plus, etc. And the penetration and the usage of Disney Plus also went through the roof during this period as well. So the question, as you mentioned, are more people are watching 6-1. So on the left-hand side of this graph is just a normal year where it's just ticking along. You get some events, so numbers go quite high in terms of the peaks. Then you get into 2020 and you can see the massive numbers also mapping out the year in terms of news consumption in parallel to stories about COVID right up to the end of the year. And then you can see the spike at the very right-hand side. That is the new lockdown and people listening to the Taoiseach's address as well on our news program. So questions we're asking ourselves is, what is the pandemic effect? We know that, you know, if news might typically rise by 5%, we're seeing 40%, so it's a 35% impact of pandemic. What's the no commute effect? And then the fact that drive time radio, people are not commuting at that time, but they're listening at home. And also they can switch much more quickly from radio to TV if they so desire around 6 o'clock. More young people came to watch news in this period. This had never happened. We were seeing declines in young people consuming news on TV, but we found all throughout this year that there was relatively more under 34s starting to consume news on TV versus what typically the older audiences. Question is, are they here to stay? But not only do you have the traditional technology bringing people back in, but things like Alexa and Google and those, COVID accelerated adoption of these technologies. We know this from our own data, where when people are calling up RT News, we saw massive increases again, just mapping similar picture to traditional TV and radio. And then in terms of shape of the day as well, you know, first thing in the morning, people using their Amazon to find out what's happening on the news at 7 o'clock in the morning. And all those numbers were rising as well. But all boats rose in terms of consumption during this period. But within the entertainment sphere of players and Netflix, we were seeing huge growth as well. Across all ages. It's interesting when you look at the different types of players and who chooses to consume what across different players. For example, Prime Video was not attractive for over 65s, whereas the BBC player and our player are more and more older people are coming in to use those. They weren't using them before. They didn't feel a need to, and now they're becoming more attractive for them. So technology is impacting everybody across all ages in the country. And we also do a piece of work around what do people want, how are they feeling, and this is all really important for RT as a public service broadcaster, trying to understand that mood of the nation. So again, typically things just carry on as normal, but when you get big events like lockdowns, we can see here in blue that the levels of cheerfulness dropped around October, and also the levels of worry also increased. But then people get into their habits and carry on as normal in doing that. So we also looking at what do people want TV, and well, again, we would use Luke's company to try and understand this. Over the years, there's some key need states like comfort, unwind, experience, in touch, indulge, and escape. These have changed, and they are changing as well, especially during this period. But I expect these will go back to normal. So depending on who you are, what age you are, you will use TV to unwind. And it's interesting here, if you look at the 35 to 54s, people who tend to be at work or have young families or are looking after other people in households use TV and video to unwind. It's less so for other age groups. Whereas you look at a 16 to 24, you're more interested in TV and video just for pure distraction. These are all things that we're trying to understand, and are they changing into the future? Trust is a massive thing during this period, and during this whole political period as well. But during the whole COVID thing, a lot of the public service organisations directly involved in this area saw their levels of trust increase dramatically. You can see on the left the actual scores, and on the right the growth. So on POS didn't really have to grow too much, but it saw big growth. RT saw big growth. The guards, HSE specifically. And it's interesting that levels of trust in Google also dropped away. This is hugely important for us. We need to ensure that what we're giving out is factual, is correct, and it's what people want in terms of actual truth and trust, especially in current times. And the question really then that comes out of that for me is, has fake news had its day? I don't think so. What's the impact on social media going forward? Will it be monitored? Does it need to be monitored? Will there be a switch back to traditional media? I'm not sure, but what it also means that we have to be everywhere. We have to be on all platforms. People want trust, and they want to consume trusted media. So therefore, we need to be in all those platforms. Luke's already said there will be an impact on mental health now and in the future. That's a concern, and we have to be across that and communicate that to people. Future scheduled content. Well, we saw the TV viewing levels are still quite high. People still want scheduled content, but they also want content where and when they want, and types of content that they want at a particular time. And there's things, are we about to see a whole new roaring 20s once this is over? Are people going to go half mad and head out into the streets, and levels of media will drop maybe temporarily before they go back to normal? And also in this period, there's other things that people want. We want to understand, after all this is over, what's the most important thing for you? And it's things like hairdressers, DIY stores, clothes shops, garden centres. So in all this madness, there is some levels of normality that people want to get back to. I'll hand back to Luke.
Great, thank you, Paul. So some parting thoughts. I know we've thrown quite a bit at you today. So I suppose at a macro level, one of the interesting things to note is that demographically we remain strong. So we're a large population, we're the youngest in Europe and highly educated, and it's not emigrating anytime soon. With other recessions, obviously people went elsewhere, and that, with this one, we're all literally all stuck in it together, and that, we're resilient and pragmatic. So this is the second recession for many of us, and indeed the third for others, and that because we have a history of adjusting what to cut, that we still need to treat ourselves, how to prioritize, etc. Footfall is going to be weak for the foreseeable future. So due to health concerns, social distancing and premises and on transport as well, restrictions will be inevitable. So our experiences outdoors, online and in home will be important, and that's what companies and organizations are looking at. How do they cater for these, especially as we move into this year? For example, how will our Valentine's Day look? How will St. Patrick's Day look, or week look? Easter, how will that look like? So we need to plan that people will be less spontaneous for some time. I remember when I did a piece of work with Paul there last year, and I put up a slide, I think it was in May, Paul, and I said, well, what will Halloween look like if we can't go to Halloween? And everyone sort of laughed, as in we'll definitely have Halloween, but it came to pass we didn't actually have Halloween, so, or it was very different on that, So we need to look, because it's not as if everything's going to change overnight. It'll be an easing back into some form of normality in that, but people are certainly looking at in terms of planning. It's an uneven economy. Some markets will remain more challenged than others. For example, we'll have spending on household goods. Home improvements are going to be very, very important. People are going to appreciate where they live. Takeaways, technology, and these have all sort of proved quite resilient and will prove quite popular over the next 6 months now. The likes of overseas travel and pub and other socializing, even though it's possible, will take longer to recover. There'll be a little bit of a nervousness in terms of overseas travel and indeed getting back into certain social quarters, even when there's a relaxation and that, which won't be obviously for a while. There's opportunities for the domestic market, and it's how we cater for those experiences. How do we improve on last year when we all were let loose? As you saw in Paul's figures there in terms of TV viewing, it actually was at probably the lowest level in August. That's when everyone was just let loose out and went out exploring the wilds of Ireland that they never explored before. And there's a significant level of savings. So it's at a historic high, coupled with reduced debt compared to the last recession. And the question is, when will cash be released and across what sectors? And that is one of the silver linings, if there is a silver linings to this. In terms of attitudes and behavior, there's a tension between the economy and health. So concern about people's health is mental health is right, but so too is the economy and the broader health concerns as well. So there's been a shift from mainly COVID-related health concerns and the health of the family and friends to a broader set of issues that may affect our future on that. So people are concerned about the recession, the global outlook as they look forward in that, but also indeed, I suppose, mental health, their own and others within the family as well, and indeed broader health as well. And looking backwards, I suppose there's even a sense, that's a greater sense of loss. Even those that have been doing well before COVID, and that now there's a greater sense of loss as the gap has widened dramatically. Job loss. So people have experienced job losses. If you take this government supports into consideration, or you strip those away, we'd be at north of 20% unemployment. If you think back, this time last year, we were at 4%, around that. So that is a significant increase by any stretch of the imagination and that. And there's expectations that salaries will be reduced and especially amongst Dubliners. Gen Z are the big victims in this. They're most concerned about the global recession. They're concerned that their rituals have been disrupted. And there's a great opportunity, we feel, for brands to be able to engage here. As we mentioned, COVID's a real catalyst for change. I suppose, despite the challenges we're facing there here at the moment, and that there's certainly a desire for a better quality of life in the future. And millennials in particular see this as a real opportunity for change, to focus maybe a little bit more on nature. The environment will remain important, and indeed diet, fitness and exercise will all be on people's minds as we move out of this. Heightened importance of home and interiors, remote working, how you do this, the ergonomics of it, the quality of the time that we spend. We'll have a fluid workforce after this. We'll have a little bit more working from home, or a blended approach. And that has implications for advertisers, media agencies, and indeed, as Paul said, and that with more of us popping in at lunchtime to watch the news maybe than we once would have done in previous lives and that. So there's some things that will certainly change into the future and that. And technology has increased in importance. It's not surprising. It was on that upward trajectory anyway, but it's just being given a real hit and an acceleration in terms of the pace of change in that. But I think we'll be smarter about the positive aspects and indeed the challenges of technology into the future in that. There's already talk about how do you control, I suppose, people's online time at home in terms of their working, their level of emails. Now there's talk about, let's not have 5 Zoom meetings where you could have got to one physical meeting. Why clutter your diary with loads of Zooms first thing in the morning and that, yeah? So there's ways that people are looking at into the future, how they manage their time and the technology. And online purchasing is continuing to grow, and that will continue into the future. Some people have learned new ways of doing things. They're not going to give up. And it'll be about the coexistence, I suppose, of the high street and online into the future. and how businesses evolve in terms of that blended sort of approach going forward, because people will want face-to-face contact. It's undeniable. The importance of treating and rewarding. So what new social occasions will open up as restrictions lift will be important as well. And what occasions can, I suppose, brands deliver to and indeed own. And I suppose the parting thought for brands really in this, brands which are adept at gauging the mood and are nimble and quick to adjust, I suppose, to the shifting needs will emerge strongly from, I suppose, this period of a history of that. Those who are unable to do so will be left behind. And also remember, a lot of existing habits remain. So we don't have to get sucked into only looking for new things. Breakfast, as this great line from Heinz and some of their advertising at the moment, breakfast isn't going anywhere. There might be just more of us at home having it rather than doing it on the go. People are desiring a more creative and inspiring touch through the brand value as well. So there's a real opportunity for brands and organizations to lead here. And I suppose despite the importance of online, the physical experience of being somewhere will become even more important to us as restrictions lift, with a vaccine and the vaccine rollout and that. We're going to appreciate, I think, physical stimuli more strongly, the moods, the sounds, the smells, the sensations of physical interaction and that. And the physical ambience was an important thing to get right when this COVID threat retreats into the future on that. And getting the basics right. The original product makers and developers, usually which were also the owners of the brand, branded to ensure their customers could expect certainty, consistency of quality, relevance, and indeed trust. So getting the basics right is important. There'd be bonus points for companies and brands and operators that keep the prices fair as businesses get up and running. And I suppose finally, one point to make as well in terms of brands is people will get their lives back on track in stages while we await, I suppose, the vaccine rollout. And this makes, I suppose, the emotional connections even more important. We, as brand owners and organizations, need to be brave. The creative power of brands needs to be harnessed as we move through the phases to really aspire and just not go dark on the consumer. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm sure we'll hand over for questions now.
Thanks, Luke and Paul. That was a great presentation. I'm sure there will be tons of questions coming through. So just for our audience, remember to ask the questions through the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of the screen. While we wait for some questions also to come through, I see there are a few already, but I have a question of my own, and that's probably more for Paul. I would be curious to know, say, what you showed us was an increase in terms of demand for news throughout the day, essentially. But at the same time, I think there is also COVID as a whole has had lots of media coverage for obvious reasons. But at some point, people want to know also some positive news at times, or something more easy to digest, a bit funnier and so on. So how did you find the balance, or are you trying to find the balance between these two types of content, which one is in demand, but it's probably a bit too sad after a while, or there might be a bit of fatigue over time, and something that might just lighten up the mood a bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, typically to understand that, we would use companies like Lux to try and understand what people want, through qualitative or quantitative research. But sometimes when you ask people what they want, they don't always tell you the truth. So, you would think that during COVID, I think we are all sick of COVID. We're all sick of the news. But in terms of actual currency numbers, it's through the roof. People are still consuming it. But we also know that they want other things too. Our challenge last year, is being able to make that content. I think it's a challenge for all content makers at the moment. It's very, very difficult. I was talking to our Director of Acquisitions last week, and we're making some drama, a co-production with BBC or somebody like that. And the cost just for the PPE is €900,000. And these are additional costs that people are trying to cover as well. Our own Fair City and soaps are huge, entertainment for some people, it may not be for others. We know people want more of those. It's being able to make those as well. So it's a challenge. People want more entertainment, and also depends on the people. Sports entertainment for one person, news is entertainment for a news junkie. And then you have people just wanting a piece of content when they want as well. That's the big challenge, is keeping up the Netflixes and all those types, where people, they can deliver big pieces of content at any time of the day when they want.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. I also have a question for Luke there. In your departing thoughts, you mentioned the opportunity to create a brand in the current situation, and I was thinking about my latest experience. I've been trying to refurbish a room in my apartment, and I ended up buying products to some small and medium companies which I've never heard of, just because they came up in my search feed. So I think, from my point of view, I think there would be a great opportunity for people that so far have had a shop like many others, but in the online world, in the current scenario, they'll be able to find their own space and to differentiate themselves. So we could just see what's your view on this.
Yeah, and you see, yeah, I think, yeah, there's a great opportunity for the local. What is the goodwill? First off, that people want to do the right thing, and it just fits with the current zeitgeist and that. And I think, which is kind of interesting, if you look at the local areas, now, one of the good things about social media is whereby you're seeing local groups and forums springing up. So be it, say, Shankill or Dalkey or Dunleary group on Facebook, and people are issuing recommendations. And even through the lockdown, do you know anybody that can actually fix a washing machine? Do you know somebody that I can get to share, this sort of, and that's one of the very good aspects of social media, through that recommendations of brands and companies and products and everything else. And indeed, other media outlets helping. And I think in terms of Paul's organization, in terms of RT, have helped businesses and local businesses. And I remember actually, I think it was on the Late Late Show. It was about local businesses anyway. And I was about to go off and buy, I think it was earbuds, Apple ones. But there was a local Irish company that was doing them. I think it was up in Swords, and I went and bought them instead. So, and it was so, yes. So there's I think there's a great opportunity there at the moment, and I think it's a good time. And many businesses have started out in recessions. Like actually, Behaviour Attitudes started out in '85. It was a dreadful recession, massive unemployment. Everyone thought they're mad, setting up a market research company. It's a good time to do it sometimes.
Yeah, thanks. I can see a question. I think this is probably addressed to Paul. Did you see any uptick in young people consuming news around international events, for example, Brexit and US election?
Yeah, I think, any big event drives a lot of new viewers to our channel, especially elections, especially Brexit and COVID. We see the same with sport. Our challenge is to move them on to other content as well, so that they just don't come for one or two pieces of content. But they also come across not just on TV or radio, but this is where I mentioned we have to be available on all other platforms. We get them in through our player and mobile as well.
All right. Ocean says, Paul, great talk. Just curious on the distracted state stats you mentioned on the television slide. Is there using TV watching as a distraction, or is it a case of people using a second screen while watching TV, therefore making them distracted?
I think it's a bit of both. We do know that people are using two screens, and it happens in sport. And I think it's if somebody's watching the match, they're on talking to their friends at the same time. Both work. We're happy with the viewership, and also it's been proven that they become more engaged as well if they're chatting to their friends about a particular piece of content on screen. So it's distraction, and when we say distraction, it's more about being bored, so I have nothing else to do. Happy enough to come watch us. We'll try and onboard them.
And then this is a more general question that I'll throw at both of you. Do you think people will keep the same spending patterns once the pandemic is over?
Yeah, we will just dust off the crystal ball here and just to try and give you some prediction. Look, I think one of the there's a lot of savings. Yeah, and there's two things that dictate I suppose, spend levels. One is job security. It's a big thing. So the state of unemployment and that is a very big, I suppose, influencer in terms of how people spend and how much they sort of spend on that. We know there's pent up demand. We know that people can't wait to get out of this. We know they can't wait to get some face-to-face sort of contact. We know they can't wait to go out of the home. They love home cooking and baking, but goddamn, I want somebody else to do it and get out of here as fast as possible. So as Paul was mentioning, certainly the anticipation is, and it depends on the vaccine rollout and the pace of that, but it could be Italia 90 on steroids, in terms of the exuberance and the rushing out in terms of that, because we've never seen the level of savings there and that. So it will differ as people rush out and get stuff they've never got, but if you think about it at the moment, where people would have traditionally after Christmas gone to the sales and bought maybe a suit, jacket, way down. No, like I'm wearing a jacket today. Traditionally, I might wear a suit and a tie. I'm not about to come on here and wear a tie, so it's it has changed things dramatically. But as we get unleashed back out into more normal behavior and that, which means social contact, things will change and that into the future.
Yeah, I can jump in there as well. So during the whole period, especially at the start, nobody knew what was happening. We saw a lot of advertisers taking their money off RTE and same for our competitors as well, purely because McDonald's was shut down, so there's no point in advertising. The second time around, if you want to call it that, we're a bit more aware, we're a bit more knowledgeable about what to do. So in terms of overall spending from the big companies, that's increasing again, and I think consumers will probably follow as the advertisers try to encourage them to spend their money.
Super. Then a question here from Tom. This is addressed to Luke. Do you know if similar research across the EU or the UK has found some similar findings, or are there standout findings in Ireland?
Yeah, not at the moment. Not at the moment. Like the main thing is just people's likely to uptake of vaccines, and that does differ from country to country, and you see France has a big problem at the moment, in terms of their likely uptake, and we're not too far off in terms of the UK, I think, But I think, the economic situation, and certainly back in May, June of last year, there's differences in terms of the economy and I suppose people's level of pessimism and that, whereby I think we were certainly a little bit more pessimistic than I think in terms of the UK, in terms of the impact and that. But just in terms of all the other aspects, I think mental health was the other aspect, which seems to be coming up very high in our studies versus some international work that we had seen as well on that, and yeah, so they're the key differences that we can allude to at this stage.
Thanks. This one for Paul. How do RTE manage in terms of segmentation targeting on TV shows? Is there still specific nights that might be targeted to specific consumer segments, and does this impact viewers' behavior?
Yeah, I mean, we have our own internal segmentation just to understand people's needs more than anything, and what we've found is that obviously throughout the week people's needs change. You can see that on a Monday night versus a Friday night, and for example, the Late Late Show, we try not to be as heavy as we used to be. People don't need that. We try and cater for people's needs, but also, because we're public service and we're trying to cater for everybody, it's just understanding those needs. One of the key findings, we usually talk about age. 35-year-old. Let's make content for a 35-year-old. So 35-year-old male or female. The 35-year-old could have a child or not. Then, depending on what age that child is, will all determine what time they have or what type of content they want to consume. So we're aware of all those. We use them to try and understand people's needs in order to make more relevant content. Yeah.
All right. Luke, there is a question here in relation to previous year's study, essentially. Showed that COVID is now the #1 important issue for people, along with health services, education, unemployment, etc. But what has COVID replaced in this list that people would have thought of as an important issue in the past, pre-pandemic?
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, like the economy would be just stronger, so it would be more dominant as a feature. Health and the health services is always up there in the top list. Again, it would just more dominant. Probably housing and homelessness, rent, and that might be a little bit more topical, and a little bit higher up in that sort of listing of that. But it would be more that what the interesting thing is that some of the focus on the economy has sort of dissipated down, and mental health has just appeared out of nowhere, and it's the tension between those two is the key thing.
All right. Paul, touching on what you said about seeing a withdrawal of advertisers, do you think there is also a move towards social media platforms and influencers marketing?
Yes, it's really a question for a marketeer or an advertiser. I know within RT that our marketeers are very much on that platform, influencing and trying to use those platforms. It's not my area of expertise. In terms of research, we know people are using them more often. Luke may have research on this, but we see movement around different types of social media, and advertisers are absolutely all over it. Yeah.
Yeah, just to jump in there. Yeah, so the likes of the big gains are obviously Instagram, TikTok. In the last year, they've gone through the roof. And that. So there's just more platforms around, and the youths coming onto the newer ones, as you'd expect, and the oldies a little bit more stuck to the traditional ones, if you can call Facebook and that traditional at this stage still. But anyway, yeah, so it's still very prominent.
And still in relation to advertising demand, has RT seen demand for advertising change over the last year? And there, if you have any insights into this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned earlier that there was a complete collapse of advertising to start with, because people just didn't know, or companies didn't know what to do. Obvious big advertiser at the moment, it's HSE in terms of information and communicating information. There's also how people communicate. People talk about greenwashing, and some companies jumping on that bandwagon to be part of it, or to try to be part of it, whether they're actually doing that or not. But ultimately, it's over the years, we've seen drops in certain types of advertising. Things like FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, like your pasta or your cornflakes, whatever, always high up there. Technology's really grown the last number of years. Types of finance, online, and even social media companies themselves advertising. I saw my first, actually quite a good ad yesterday for TikTok on TV. So TV still has a part to play, but they're advertising themselves on the TV platform.
That's a very interesting one, Paul, actually, because a lot of marketeers would say, oh yeah, it's all digital, yeah, we don't need to use other traditional forms of media. But when then you point out actually where do the tech companies advertise their brands, they're using a lot of traditional media to build their brands. TV, radio, outdoor, very strong, and then being more tactical in terms of the digital sort of space. So they're they know how their platforms work very well, and the traditional sort of media channels.
Hey, super. I think we have enough questions to keep you here for the rest of the day, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So thank you, Luke and Paul, for taking the time for joining us today. There was a very interesting talk and very interesting insights that you shared with us. Just before we wrap up, I would like to remind everyone who is interested, this Transform event will go on for the rest of the week, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. daily. Tomorrow we have a panel discussion on retail, followed by a talk on one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals on Wednesday. Then a day on food-related insights, And then finally, a panel discussion on Friday on what can we learn from the pandemics. And then, so it's an agenda quite packed for the agenda is quite packed for the rest of the week. So I hope to see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.